run as smooth as possible. As always, please, brethren, if you've got a question to ask, please use the hand up icon on Zoom. Wait for your name to be called out, and then you may ask your question, but please do not forget to mute yourselves again. Thank you. Before I introduce our next speaker, we are once away giving away 2 of our bespoke Freemasons Without Borders mugs, which I know you all want. So for the chance of winning, it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question. You must answer the following question. What is Ian's favourite band? Please type your answers in the chat section, and as always, the first 2 correct answers will win. Brethren, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the most distinguished companion, Ian CURRANS, Grand SUMMUS of the Ancient and Masonic Order of the Scarlet Cord. Ian began his Masonic journey in December 1977 and joined Abbey Lodge, Westminster, number 2030, where he was initiated, passed and raised. Ian comes from a long line of Freemasons. His late grandfather was also a member of the same lodge, having been initiated in 1927. And Ian himself was proposed by his father, making it 3 generations in the same lodge. Due to his dedication, Ian has achieved many accolades in Masonry and is a very worshipful brother in the craft, as well as the past assistant Metropolitan Grand Master. He's also a past assistant Metropolitan Grand Superintendent in the Holy Royal Arch and is a member of no less than 8 other orders administered out of Mark Mason's Hall. Ian was appointed as Grand SUMMUS of the Ancient and Masonic Order of the Scarlet Cord in 2018. There is no doubt that his hard work, passion, and commitment, along with a great team by his side, has been a vital contributing factor to the order increasing its membership by circa 8% last year, making it the biggest growth of any of the progressive orders. Ian dedicates much of his time to Masonry and is always on hand to offer advice should a brother need it. How he fits it all in with work and family is quite outstanding. Grand SUMMUS, it's over to you. You're on mute, Ian, sorry.
Right. Thank you, Amit, for that lovely introduction. And good afternoon, brethren, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. A special welcome, of course, as I've already said, to Christine Chapman and the members of the HFAF who are joining us this evening. My talk is about the Ancient and Masonic Order of the Scarlet Cord, one of the additional or progressive orders administered from Mark Mason's Hall in London, and the order of which I'm privileged to be Grand Master, or in our terminology, Grand SUMMUS. Scarlet Cord is widely regarded as being a new order. Indeed, Ryan Williams, the Grand Secretary and Grand Recorder, described it as such in a talk to this very group 3 weeks ago. And that, of course, is true. It was inaugurated in 2010. But in actual fact, the 2010 inauguration was the rebirth of an order that had originally come into existence towards the end of the 19th century. So let's first look back to that time. The Order of the Secret Monitor was formally established in this country in 1887. It appears that one of the leading lights of that order, Judge Frederick Philbrick, there's Judge Philbrick, the first Grand Chancellor, decided very early on that the OSM needed an appendant order, as several of the other Masonic bodies had, an order that would strengthen and augment the OSM and assist in raising capital for its benevolent aspirations. Hence was born in 1889, just 2 years afterwards, the Royal Order of Knights of the Scarlet Cord. It was governed by a senatus, presided over by the SUMMUS. There were 6 grades, the ritual for which Philbrick composed from several sources, including an amplification of elements from the new OSM second degree. The most significant aspect of promotion through the grades was to have made increasingly large contributions to the OSM's benevolent fund. In the higher grades, eye-wateringly large contributions. Perhaps not surprisingly, membership of the order was never great. The first three grades were worked in a consistory. There was only ever one, Metropolitan Consistory in London. But grades 1 and 2 could be worked in sub-consistories, of which there were 5. Northern, which worked in Yorkshire, and others in South Africa, Central India, Madras, now called Chennai, of course, and Burma, which is called something I can't remember. Thank you. But the order didn't need to be large. In 1915, the SUMMUS was the Earl of Warwick. There's the Earl of Warwick. The past SUMMUS was the Earl of Halsbury. The Regent Vicarius was the Earl of Lonsborough. And the King of Arms was Field Marshal Lord Methuen. That just gives you a flavour of the type of people that were members. Metropolitan Consistory worked regularly until 1914, when it went into abeyance and was revived in 1919. All workings of the order ceased in 1929. Nobody knows why. Maybe it was just too expensive after the years of the First World War and the Great Depression. Maybe its pomp and splendour, wearing court dress and other relics of the Victorian era, were just outdated. Maybe because the founding fathers were all dead by 1929. Maybe because its aim of raising a huge capital sum for the OSM Benevolent Fund had been achieved. Maybe the OSM's new Grand Supreme Ruler, Charles Napier Clavering, was not a fan. Possibly a combination of all these. Suffice to say, that was it for over 70 years. On the 8th of June 2001, Peter Glyn Williams Grand Supreme Ruler of the OSM, delivered a paper to the Supreme Rulers Conclave number 123 at Mark Mason's Hall about the old order. Peter said this was, and I quote, in response to the interest shown by brethren in their questions when visiting conclaves in the provinces. The paper was widely distributed both here and overseas, and doubtless generated even more interest, but still the order remained in abeyance. In 2005, the concept of match funding charitable donations by provinces and districts from the OSM Benevolent Fund was raised at the Executive Committee. The OSM Grand Treasurer was in favour, but pointed out that if the demand was high, the interest on the capital would be insufficient to cover the donations. The fund needed a significant top-up. It was then that the Deputy Grand Supreme Ruler, Brian Wareham, one second, there's Brian. It was then that Brian suggested to Peter Glyn Williams the idea of resuscitating the old Scarlet cord, with its system of payments to the Benevolent Fund being a requirement for entry and promotion through the grades. Donations much smaller, it must be said, than the huge ones set in the Victorian era. Peter and Brian floated the suggestion past a few senior OSM members on a trip to South Africa in February 2006. We were all in favour, and they then spent a considerable amount of time in searching the archives at Mark Mason's Hall and Great Queen Street for documents and rituals. On 17th of November 2006, Peter, as Grand Supreme Ruler and therefore guardian of the old rite, created a small group as members of the order and then worked a revised first grade. It was also decided to consecrate a special secret monitor conclave to introduce princes, in other words, those that had taken their second degree in the Order of the Secret Monitor, into this appendant order and eventually process them through the various grades. Scarlet, called Conclave number 500, came into being on the 5th of December 2006. During 2007, the conclave travelled all over England and to Scotland to admit candidates into the order. Such was the overwhelming demand that further Scarlet called conclaves were consecrated both in England and overseas from January 2008 onwards. These local units gradually took on the burden of admitting candidates, leaving number 500 free to promulgate the subsequent grades as they were being revised or written. In 2009, a steering committee was constituted to report on what the future might hold for this booming order. The Grand Recorder at that time, John Brackley, soon suggested the radical idea of constituting it as a sovereign order in its own right, free from the OSM. The idea was embraced enthusiastically, and the steering committee, renamed the Way Forward Committee, set about a programme to produce this end result. There was, as can be imagined, a phenomenal amount to do. Apart from the revising and writing of the grades, which was ongoing, an inauguration ritual had to be produced, constitutions written, a structure at Grand Senatus and provincial and district level established, regalia to be designed, appointments to be made. The list is almost endless. Nevertheless, it was all achieved by a relatively small number of people in a relatively short space of time. The inauguration of the order was set for the 21st of July 2010 at Great Queen Street. In the morning in Temple 10, Scarlet called Conclave number 500 met for the last time and admitted multiple candidates who all wanted to witness the inauguration of a new order. Subsequently, OSM Grand Conclave was opened in the Grand Temple, and the 64, by that time, Scarlet called conclaves were formally removed from the roll. A Scarlet called consistory was then opened, and Grand Senatus was then constituted, dedicated and consecrated to comprise 64 consistories by Brian Wareham. Michael Guest, Grand Supreme Ruler of the Order of the Secret Monitor. There's Michael. Michael was installed as Grand SUMMUS by Michael Herbert, and he then invested the Grand Officers, including provincial and district Grand Summai, dealt with administrative business, and closed Grand Senatus. An excellent dinner at the Connaught Rooms followed. All in all, a staggeringly impressive day, orchestrated quite superbly, it has to be said, by Roy Levers, the Grand Director of Ceremonies. The order has progressed constantly since that day. Michael Guest was succeeded by Andrew Sweeney in 2012, and I took over in 2018. So where are we now? Our memberships are in excess of 3,300, distributed around 22 provinces in England and Wales, 5 districts overseas, Southeast Asia, Southern Caribbean, Southern India, Western India and Spain, as well as unattached consistories on the Isle of Man, in Switzerland, Hong Kong, Eastern India, and had it not been for the suspension, Estonia. Additionally, Scarlet Cord ceremonies are worked in Australia, New Zealand and Canada under their OSM Grand Conclaves, and in America under the Allied Masonic Degrees USA. We currently have 133 consistories, with several more just waiting to be consecrated once the suspension is over. Our membership growth last year, as Emmett said, was 8.5%, making us easily the fastest growing mainstream Masonic order. Now, the structure. The order's regulatory body is Grand Senatus, and the structure of that is identical to the majority of other orders. Similarly, a province or district overseas is ruled by a provincial or district Grand Summus with the usual complement of officers. The individual unit is called a consistory. At its head is the president, who, apart from the usual leadership duties, is responsible for performing third grade ceremonies within the consistory. His senior warden equivalent is the primus of lectores, whose duty it is to perform second grade ceremonies. And the junior warden equivalent is the primus of ostiarii, who performs first grade ceremonies. So it's noteworthy that companions will potentially reach the chair of president with 2 ceremonies already under their belt. Each consistory has 4 lecturers who deliver rather challenging pieces of ritual in the first and second grades to relate the appropriate Old Testament stories. Many consistories meet either before or, unusually, after an OSM meeting and then dine together. This has the advantage of keeping costs to a minimum. Some of the officers' titles are Latin names and are retained from the original order. As I've mentioned, Primus of Lectores, Primus of Ostiaria, and Episcopus for the chaplain. And at grand level, Summus, of course, and Grand Regent Vicarius, a distinction bestowed on a very small number of companions above the level of a provincial or district head. The individual member is a companion, marking a distinction to the mother order, the Order of the Secret Monitor, where brother is used, and reflecting the brother-companion relationship in the Craft and Royal Arch. The charity contribution for promotion through the grades is no longer required. So, what are the ceremonies? The first grade, for which, as previously explained, a candidate must have taken their second degree in the Order of the Secret Monitor, relates the biblical story of Rahab, who hid Joshua's spies before the capture of the city of Jericho. To protect herself and her family during that battle, Rahab tied a scarlet cord in her window. Rahab is widely believed to have run a house of entertainment, let's call it that, and the scarlet cord in her window is reckoned by some to be the origin of the term red light district. Possession of this grade brings with it the title Ostiarius, meaning gatekeeper. Rahab went to live among the Israelites and married the son of one of the spies. They had a son, Boaz. Yes, the very same Boaz who is mentioned so fleetingly in the craft. The second grade of our order is about Boaz and his marriage to Ruth, events which are related in the 8th book of the Bible. They have a son called Obed, who had a son called Jesse, who was the father of King David. So, thanks to Scarlet Cord, you can now see that Boaz was indeed the great-grandfather of David. Candidates for this grade receive the title lector, meaning reader. The third grade is unique amongst Scarlet Cord ceremonies in that it is not based upon an Old Testament story. Much of it is lifted straight from the original order's third grade and is concerned with honor and the hope of resurrection in the life to come. Candidates become fellows. As I alluded to previously, the first 3 grades of the order are conferred in an individual consistory. There is, of course, an installation ceremony, which brings with it the title distinguished. So you have a distinguished companion president. But before a suitably elected companion can be installed, he must go through the preparation ceremony, which is based on the early life of the prophet Samuel and is usually conducted at provincial level. A prepared companion bears the title eminent. 3 years after installation, and upon recommendation by the province or district, a past president can be nominated for the 4th grade. This ceremony is conducted by the Grand SUMMUS and the Grand Officers of the Year, with significant contributions by the 4 Grand Lecturers. As we return again to the events leading up to the capture of Jericho and elements of the battle itself. This is always a wonderfully spectacular occasion with lots of colour, music,
Ian, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. What's happened here?
Right. You're back on.
Okay. Where do we get to? Did we lose something?
We just lost your last sentence.
Okay. Let's go back. So we were talking about the 4th grade. This is always a wonderfully spectacular occasion with lots of colour, music and singing. Very much a Ben-Hur production, bringing with it the appellation counsellor. This is in complete contrast to the 5th grade ceremony, which is on a much smaller scale, reflecting its exclusivity. The grade is only conferred on grand officers of 3 years standing, on recommendation of the local rulers, and is limited to 2 recipients per province or district per year. Here we learn of the story of the prophet Jeremiah, a name mentioned almost as an aside in the Royal Arch exaltation ceremony, and Jeremiah's role in preserving the temple treasures before the attack of the Babylonians. Keeper of the hidden secret is the enigmatic title bestowed here. The 6th grade, our final grade, is only conducted when necessity dictates and is conferred very sparingly and entirely at the discretion of the Grand SUMMUS. Various episodes in the Wars of the Maccabees form the basis of this, the most dramatic of all the grades. The Maccabees were essentially Jewish freedom fighters some 150 years before the birth of Christ, and their triumph left the Jews in peace and in command of their own destiny until the Roman invasion around 100 years later. Those in possession of this grade are designated Prince of Jerusalem. So, what of the regalia? A companion of the order wears a scarlet cord. Either around the waist or over the shoulder, depending on his grade. Additionally, he wears a jewel suspended around his neck for the first and second grades. So that's a first grade jewel. That's a second grade jewel. Or a breast jewel for the third grade. That's a third grade jewel. Officers of a consistory wear a sash. Officer sash. And the president, primus of lectores, and primus ostiarii wear collarettes, which reflect their responsibilities for conferring the first, second, and third grades. So that's the collarette for the first grade, which the primus of ostiarii wears. If you remember, ostiarius means a gatekeeper, so it's a key, a golden key. The primus of lectores, the senior warden equivalent, wears this collarette. Remember, in the second grade, you become a lector, and there's a scroll on the end of the collarette. And as I said, the third grade is the responsibility of the president. It's much concerned with the hope of everlasting life in the afterlife, and that's a president's collarette. Provincial and district officers wear strident yellow sashes. I haven't got one of those here, but there's a photograph there, several people wearing provincial sashes. They're just, district ones are just the same. While those of grand officers are, of course, scarlet. That's actually my grand officer's sash. Holders of the fourth grade have breast jewels. There's a picture of a fourth grade breast jewel. The colours of the order, of course, black, white, and red, and a representation of the Ark of the Covenant. Bear in mind, the fourth grade is about the Battle of Jericho, and those of you who know your biblical history will know the significance of the Ark of the Covenant in the capture of the city of Jericho. So holders of the fourth grade have that breast jewel, while those of the holders of the fifth and sixth grades wear these splendid but slightly ostentatious stars, silver for the fifth grade and gold for the sixth grade. They're worn in the breast pocket. They're known colloquially as sheriff's badges or marshal badges for the gold ones. The members of the Grand SUMMUSes personal bodyguard, the Sadiqim, wear purple sashes. There's a Grand Sadiqim sash, again with the Ark of the Covenant on it. And they have special swords. That's rather splendid, isn't it? While the Grand SUMMUS himself, of course, has plenty of bling, including this collarette, baton, chain, and purple robe. There we are. Which is currently hanging like Batman's cape in the Batcave, just waiting for the call to action. And finally, what's special about the Scarlet Cord, and why, those of you that aren't in it, why should you consider joining? I've put, I think, 6 USPs, unique selling points. So 1, the rituals filling gaps in the craft and Royal Arch, even though chapter is not a requirement. You would certainly understand much more clearly the position of the craft 2nd and 3rd degrees and the Royal Arch exaltation and installations in the historical timeline if you were a Scarlet Cord companion. If you like, this is the 2nd USP, if you like ritual party pieces, this order is for you. Likewise, though, if you struggle with ritual, then splitting up is positively encouraged. 3, the ritual has all been written or rewritten in the 21st century, so it's clear and concise with a total absence of mumbo jumbo. There is much drama, colour, music plays an integral part. Flickering candles, flashing sword blades, stories told in flashback, and other elements from the TV age, if you like. The Scarlet Cord has it all. 4, it's predominantly based on Old Testament history, and its lessons are those of morality, not deep spirituality. 5, opportunities for progression are open through provincial or district ranks and grand ranks as well. So we have a kind of a double-edged sword here, as well as through the grades of the order. So the next step in progression is never too far away. And finally, the provincial and district rulers are all friendly, approachable, and enthusiastic. I can see 1 or 2 of them smiling that are watching this, as are those at grand level. We love to communicate and engage with individual members. Even the Grand SUMMUS is happy to take questions, as he is now. Thank you for listening.
Ian, thank you so much for that. Absolutely fascinating. I've actually been sent a couple of questions here, so I'll just crack on with them. One from Craig Harding. Why is the Ark of the Covenant used in Scarlet Cord and RSM? What is the connection?
Well, it plays a significant part, the Ark of the Covenant, in the story of the Jews through the years from about 1000 BC up until probably 600 BC. It was hugely significant, created by Aholiab and Bezalel, wasn't it? And taken by the Jews in their wanderings in the wilderness when King David gave King Solomon the plans for the temple at Jerusalem, the first temple at Jerusalem, as a home for the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was placed in the Holy of Holies. That was the final act when the temple, Solomon's temple, which we start to learn about in the second craft degree. The last thing that happened there when the temple was completed was the Ark of the Covenant was placed in the Holy of Holies. Then if you follow the story through, the Ark of the Covenant disappeared, apparently, before the Babylonians attacked in about 598 BC. The Ark of the Covenant, I should, of course, explain, was said to have held the tablets on which were written the Ten Commandments and certain other holy relics. The high priest would stand in front of the Ark of the Covenant and speak to God that way. So it was hugely significant. It's as you said, it's very important in the Royal and Select Masters, and it's very significant in the Scarlet Call. So any of these orders which tell the story of the Jews in Jerusalem from about 1000 BC, when the first temple was constructed, maybe 970 BC, something like that, up until the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians, which we learned about in the Royal Arch. The Ark of the Covenant is the most significant item.
Lovely, thank you.
That explains.
Could we go to Cliff? I think it's Cliff Sturt next.
Hello, Cliff.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
Thank you.
When the order was first established in 1889, I understand that the ritual used then was at least in part based upon 18th century documents retrieved from the Amsterdam Masonic archives.
Mm.
I don't know whether you know much about them, and I was wondering if...
I don't know anything about them. I don't even know. I'm not even sure that that's absolutely true. I don't know. It's one of the things that it's kind of lost in the midst of time at the moment. It's one of the things that we need to look at. So much about particularly about the early Scarlet Cord, we don't know about. We don't know about. There's a kind of urban myth that it was taken from documents from the Amsterdam archives, and I don't know where that came from. I know certainly some elements of the OSM came from the Amsterdam archives, but I'm not entirely convinced that Scarlet Cord elements came from the Amsterdam archives. It's one of the things that preparing for this talk has made me realise there's a lot of research we need to do on the old order, and that's certainly one of the items. It's interesting. The story of Rahab is actually, if you look at the first printed version of the OSM second degree, you'll know the long lecture at the end of the OSM second degree. There are several paragraphs about the Rahab story which are in that lecture in the OSM, which were eventually taken out. And so that when I said items of the OSM were used to as a foundation for the Scarlet Cord ceremonies, that was one of the stories. So as I say, there's lots to find out, lots of things we don't know about. It's very, very sketchy at the moment. So that's my project, one of my projects when we get back to business.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I wondered whether those old Dutch documents gave us any sort of link between the OSM and the Scarlet Cord.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I rather doubt it, to be honest. I rather doubt it, but it's a work in progress.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Cliff. Over to Shri in India next, please.
Oh, Shri.
So sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you, most distinguished companion Ian, for that wonderfully comprehensive lecture.
Thank you. How are you?
From India. All well, sir. Thank you.
Good.
As far as I know, the Scarlet Cord is unique in that it is the only significant Masonic order that has as its central themes the allegorical tales of two very remarkable women, Rahab and Ruth.
Yeah.
Two-part question: was this a conscious
Yes.
choice or a
Yes,
happy
that's right.
accident?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was this a conscious choice, sorry, or a happy accident? And secondly,
Well,
sorry, well, why don't you
okay.
split it up? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, right. Rahab, it was obviously a conscious choice when Philbrick was writing the first Scarlet Cord ritual. As I say, he lifted the story of Rahab from, I think, probably several sources, but principally from the OSM. So certainly that was a conscious choice. I mean, it may seem, and I know this has been mentioned by one or two people to me. It seems strange initially to think that a Masonic order can be based on a person who was actually a prostitute. It's a difficult concept for us to understand, but Rahab understood at the time that, bear in mind, she lived in Jericho, she was a Canaanite, she understood that the true God was the God of the Israelites, and she, if you like, she betrayed her own people by hiding spies, and because she knew that God was the God of the Israelites, was the true God. So it's very much about, and she risked her life in saving the spies. So it's a lesson in faith. So I mean that's the big lesson from the first grade, faith.
Right.
The story of Ruth is interesting because, as I understand it, and I haven't looked at I haven't had the opportunity of looking at the original second grade ceremony, but it was mostly about geometry. It was very dull and turgid, and principally Brian Wareham rewrote the second grade about Ruth because it's an important story. Again, Ruth was an honourable woman, full of charity. She as we said, she married Boaz. All related in the book of Ruth in the Bible, and that book was Peter Glynn Williams's favourite Bible story. So really, Brian composed the second grade about Ruth as a nod, if you like, to Peter Glynn Williams. So that's why the first two grades are principally about two women. But actually, there are other Masonic orders based on Rahab. One of the appendant orders in the Knight Templar priests is called Knight of Rahab, and there's an American order, American co-Masonic order called Heroines of Jericho, which is about the same story. So it's been used several times. The story of Rahab, it's been used several times in Masonry in one form or another.
Right, thanks. And the second part of the question, I think you answered partially, one by saying that you think the 18th century documents from the Amsterdam Masonic archives are a bit of an urban legend. And also you talked about the rewriting of the second grade ritual. But my second question really was, how closely do the rituals of the first three grades of the order resemble the 18th century documents from the Amsterdam Masonic archives, which I think you kind of answered. And
well, yeah, I mean, as I say, the archives, they wouldn't have been rituals.
Okay,
I think they were probably just legend. If they are of any relevance, they were just legends.
Right.
And the first grade, some of it is the first grade that Philbrick composed. Some of it is the same. Certainly, the introduction. You know, when you go into the Order of the Scarlet Cord, you have to be a Prince of the Order of the Secret Monitor, and without giving anything away, as you would expect, you have to prove yourself as such. But certainly the main part of that ceremony, which is the lecture on the story of Rahab by the four lecturers, that's not original. That's all just lifted by the ritual committee, basically from the Bible.
Sheree, sorry to continue. I've got a few more that are waiting to ask their questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Next, if we could go to Paul Burgess, please.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, Ian. Thanks for that lecture. It was really good. I'm due to join the Order of the Scarlet Cord just last week, but unfortunately, with the suspension, that's on hold for the moment. But I wondered, when people join the Order of the Secret Monitor, quite often people point out the role of, say, the visiting deacons as something very unique in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Is there some advice that you would give to anyone that's joining the Order of the Scarlet Cord as something to look out for, or just any advice in general for new members?
Well, we don't have this visiting deacon system, obviously, which the OSM has. And just to explain for people that aren't in the OSM, everybody in an OSM conclave has assigned to them the number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the role of the 4 visiting deacons, visiting deacon 1, 2, 3, and 4. The role of the visiting deacons is to keep in touch with their charges, if you like, during the gap between meetings. So it's very much a kind of buddy arm of the system, and it's certainly what a lot of craft lodges and Royal Arch chapters are adopting ironically during this lockdown period, the system that we've had in the OSM for well over 100 years. So, but we don't have that in the OSM, in the Scarlet Cord, because obviously everybody's in the OSM, so they're kind of looked after in that way. So I would say there's nothing like that, but it's just a question of, as I say, they're all interesting Bible stories. They're all very illuminating as to the history of the Jews in the Holy Land in the 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. So it's just more information for you to put on this historical timeline, where you've got the craft around, say, about 970 BC with the time of Solomon and the First Temple, and the Royal Arch when the Jews come back to Jerusalem is about 530 BC. So there's 2 points in 1,000 years, and Scarlet Cord fills in a lot of gaps in the middle and either side of those 2 points. So it's more interesting knowledge built on the basis of the craft and the Royal Arch, although you don't have to be in the Royal Arch.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Next, could we have Matthew Christmas, please?
Hello, Matthew.
Oh, hi, Ian. Thank you for a fantastic talk. I've got sort of 2 things to say. I mean, I think the interesting thing is people may not be aware that Rahab actually, in the New Testament, she appears twice. She's the only woman in the 11th book of Hebrews that talks about, it's all about an expression of faith. She's the only woman to be mentioned. And interestingly, of course, in the book of Matthew, chapter 1, she is one of the ancestors of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think probably her importance is not just that she had greater faith than the scouts who gave her all kinds of conditional promises you see in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, but also that she was remarkable. And I think that's really fascinating that she's there.
Yes, she was. Yes, she
but
was.
I was going to ask you about this 8th degree of the appendant orders. When they were setting up, when Masters Hall was re-establishing the Order of the Scarlet Cord, was there any discussion with the Knights Templar Priests, Grand College? Because they obviously have been claiming it and working it internally for a long time. No,
there wasn't. But interestingly, without giving anything away, some of the signs and secrets are very, very similar. Because Glyn Goddard has just sent me, actually, when I was looking into this, Glyn Goddard has just sent me a copy of the KTP Appendant Order Rituals. Yeah. And the similarities between our first grade and the 8th degree of the KTP Appendant Orders is striking in some respects. So that's something I need to look at as well.
I mean, some people have said that Rahab's a bit of an early form of Mary Magdalene, if you believe Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. So, really, anyway, thank you for a fascinating talk.
Thank you.
Connecting all the rituals together. Really great.
Thank you, Matthew. Next, we have Ardeshi Vakil.
Hi, Eddie.
Eddie, you just need to unmute yourself. Eddie, if you can hear us, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm trying to. Finally unmuted. Sorry.
Hello, Eddie.
Hello, Ian. How
Hello.
are you?
Fine,
Thank you for a wonderful talk, Ian.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could tell us more about the power of the Ark of the Covenant and its weight, and how with that tremendous weight, it could be carried around all over the place by the ancient.
Well, that's right. Yes, I mean, if you believe everything you told, you know that it was made of a solid mass of gold. I mean, it's difficult to believe that the poles that supported the ark would have been strong enough, and you'd probably had scores of people to carry it around. So I mean, it's a kind of a, I wouldn't say it's a myth, but I mean, some of it's like any legendary story. You have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. But I mean, it was allegedly carried around in the wilderness and set down at various places by the Israelites when they were moving around, and it was used. You know, everybody knows Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. I mean, the Bible story is that the ark was paraded around the perimeter of Jericho for every day for 7 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day, and the power of the ark finally on the 7th circuit on the 7th day, the power of the ark caused the walls of Jericho to collapse, and the Israelites stormed in and took the city. So it's a myth. It's a legend, isn't it? It's a legend, but it's a good legend. And we use the ark. We use the ark in the 4th grade. We use the ark in the 5th grade, and we use the ark in the 6th grade because it's just it's an iconic thing, isn't it? Everybody wants to know where the Ark of the Covenant is now, what happened to it. Lots of legends about what happened to the Ark, and it's a kind of it's a mythical thing, and people are interested. So it gives certainly grades 4, 5, and 6, which are wonderful. I mean, people like 1, 2, and 3, but I mean 4, 5, and 6 just fabulous, and it gives them something really special. And we do have at Mark Mason's Hall, we do have this very big copy of the Ark of the Covenant, which we use in 4, 5, and 6 to great effect, I have to say.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Ian.
Had tremendous power.
Yeah, tremendous power. Yes, tremendous power. Yes, because it's the seat of God on earth. That was what it was supposed to be. You know, God was supposed to sit between the cherubim on the top of the ark and be consulted by the high priest. Yeah.
Thank you, Eddie. Could we now go to Pablo Lesme, please?
Hi, Pablo.
Hi, brother. Hi, brother Jan. My warm greetings. Very good. My warm greetings here from Asunción, capital of the Republic of Paraguay.
Lovely.
And through me, the greetings of the symbolic Grand Lodge of Paraguay and my mother lodge, Leonardo da Vinci 100.
Yes. I know it well.
Oh, thank you, brother. Brother, fantastic lecture. Appreciate the invitation, and for me, was really great to understand a little bit more about Scarlet Core. About the battle of Jericho. Well, you was explaining a little bit more in response to the brother, but as I understand, when the battle ends, the ark was deposited in the Temple of Jerusalem. So, could you explain a little bit more the symbolism of the Battle of Jericho inside the Scarlet Core?
Yeah, well, when it was time for the Israelites to enter into the Promised Land, the land of Canaan, the first thing they had to do was to cross the River Jordan, and the Ark of the Covenant, this is the Bible story, the Ark of the Covenant was taken by the high priests and they carried the Ark of the Covenant into the middle of the River Jordan. And the power of the Ark of the Covenant is said to have dried up the River Jordan. In the same thing happened, not with the Ark of the Covenant, but the same thing happened when the Israelites were escaping from the Egyptians. They crossed the Red Sea. You know, we know the story from the Royal Arch, don't we? So the idea is that what happened was the Ark of the Covenant was carried into the middle of the River Jordan, and the River Jordan dried up, which allowed the Jews to cross into the Promised Land. And then the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant out of the River Jordan, and the water started to flow again. So they then used the first thing, once they got on the side of the Promised Land, that side of the Jordan, the next task to be accomplished was to capture Jericho. That was the first city to be captured. And again, they used the Ark of the Covenant, the power of the Ark of the Covenant, allegedly, to capture Jericho. And then, of course, there is this period of history, several generations. I mean, you've got Rahab, so then you've got the story of Rahab's son Boaz, so there's a generation there. Obed, a generation there. Jesse, a generation there. David, a generation there. And then Solomon, a generation there. So something, what's that, 4 or 5 generations until the temple at Jerusalem is built and the Ark of the Covenant finally finds its home in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, Solomon's temple at Jerusalem. So until then, there were battles, and at one stage, I can't remember who it was, maybe the Philistines captured the Ark, and all manner of dreadful things happened to them. Plagues of locusts and frogs dropping out there, and famine and disease and things like that. So they gave the Ark of the Covenant back to the Jews. So there was a time between the capture of the city of Jericho and Solomon's temple being built. They reckon that the story of Rahab may be around 1400 BC, and the building of King Solomon's temple may be around 960, 950 BC, something like that. So there was a gap, but the Ark was still around.
Thank you, Ian. Next, we go
Thank you, brother.
Okay.
we go to Alan Silvestre in Brazil, please.
Hello, Alan.
Hello, good afternoon, Ian. Well, when you describe a little bit about the first and the second degree, it seems that in the first degree that we're going to have a biblical theme, and the theological virtue of faith is denoting. In the second degree, we have the effect of charity, the character of Ruth. Is there to expect that in the third degree, we would have hope as a theme? And if that is intentional when it was written or not? And why does we not have a biblical theme in the third degree?
Okay, so to take your first point, yes, as I said, the third grade is very much about hope. It's about hope in salvation in the afterlife. So yes, it's about hope. So the first three grades of the order do teach faith, hope, and charity. And when we have this ceremony of preparation, which is a ceremony that every president-elect has to go through before he can be installed, he has to answer questions on the first, second, and third grades. And he has to, in those questions, he has to explain that they teach faith, hope, and charity. So that's absolutely right. Why is the third grade not a Bible story? Basically, when the grades were being rewritten, the third grade is is incredibly dramatic. You know, there's lots of you know, you can see that the jewel of the grade is a black ribbon and a skull and crossbones. So I think that gives you a, you know, some of the without giving too much away, some of the grade is worked in the dark with candles, skull and crossbones, things like that. So, and there are swords and, you know, swords flashing by candlelight and things like that. So people when we started off, people found, although, as I say, the third grade is unlike all the others, people like the third grade because visually, particularly visually, it's very dramatic. It's very dramatic, and also it's a very serious message. This hope in salvation idea. So so we kept it. It would have been, you know, if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. We decided to keep the third grade. Because, as I say, its message is very important. It fits in with the faith, hope, and charity thing. It fits in perfectly, and visually, people love the third grade because it is very dramatic. That's a lot of the as you progress through the Scarlet Chords, the grades get more and more dramatic. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Next, can we go to Blake Leach in Australia, please?
Hello, Blake.
Hi, and thank you very much for that. You've made me even more keen to finally join. Very much looking forward to it now.
Good.
I was just wondering, with the collarette that you showed and the grand chain for the SUMMUS, it had what looked like an eagle on there.
Yeah.
Was it an eagle, and what does that symbolize in the Scarlet Cord?
It's a Roman eagle, and the imperial purple. It's an odd thing to a certain extent, in that the grades 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 are all set. You know, are all basically Old Testament stuff about the Jews, and yet the titles of the principal officers, and many of the titles which we actually got rid of are all Latin. So I mean, SUMMUS and Grand Regent Vicarius and Primus of Lectores, they're all Roman effectively. So there's a bit of there's a slight discrepancy there, but we like the titles. You know, we thought the titles were interesting. We thought the titles were great. I mean, Grand Regent Vicarius. I always wanted to be a Grand Regent Vicarius, although I never was and I never will be now. But I thought it was such a cool title, you know. So I think we kept why they. I'm not quite sure why they. I think they probably adopted them in the first instance because the founding fathers, you know, when you talk about the names, you know, the Earl of so-and-so, the Lord so-and-so, and these people, they liked, you know, they like this, they like the titles, they like the pomp that was attached to the original ceremonies, and I think the use of these impressive Latin titles, I think, had appealed to the founding fathers. So, and again, it appealed to us when we started reworking the order. So that's the reason. That's the reason that we've got the Latin titles, we've got the Latin insignia. You know, the SUMMUS. We thought, you know, it would be, he's the boss. He would be the imperial purple, and he'd have the emperor's eagle, if you like. So that's the reason. That's the reason.
Makes sense.
Lovely. Thank you.
Because that's the thing when you're starting a new order, because you have this.
It's okay. Go on, Ian.
Oh, okay. That's the wonderful thing when you're effectively creating an order, because you have this wonderful flexibility to kind of almost to do with it what you will. You know, create ceremonies in the style that you like. In the style that you think will appeal to people, to Masons in the 21st century, to use images and to use regalia, which is strident and colourful and people will like. And think you have so much flexibility. Obviously, you have to stick between the usually accepted Masonic parameters, but then you have a lot of flexibility in creating all these different aspects which come together to form a new order.
Thank you. At this stage, I'd like to welcome, as I didn't get a chance to before, Grandmaster of the HFAF, Christine. Christine, hoping you'd like to say a few words.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, Ian. I'd just like to ask, why do you think it's taken off this time so rapidly? What is the attraction, do you think, for people now?
Well, it started off, it took off originally because people like something new. You know, people like a new order. You know, I'm sure most people here will know somebody that's in everything. You know, people like a new order. We carried it off to start with on the back of the Order of the Secret Monitor. So we got a lot of people to join because they were in the Order of the Secret Monitor initially. So that was quite a clever way of recruiting a large number of people into the order in the early days by carrying it on the back of the Secret Monitor. And one of the things we did, we said that to become a province or a district in the new Grand Senatus, when it was inaugurated, each province or district would have to have 3 individual consistories. And if that happened, the provincial or district head in the OSM would become the provincial or district head in the Scarlet Court. So, and it was a bit cynical because we knew that the provincial Grand Supreme Rulers and district Grand Supreme Rulers would work their socks off so they got 3 consistories because they get another chain, so they then have 2 chains. So you know what human nature is. So that's how we started off. So we started off with a really big base to start with. I mean, I can't remember how many people joined within the first couple of years, but I mean, it was hundreds, literally hundreds. And now I think we are building on that in a different way. I mean, we're very conscious of the power now of social media. I think you'll see much more about the Scarlet Cord on Facebook and on Twitter than probably any of the other orders. So we're very conscious of the power of social media. I mean, me coming on and doing this hopefully has got more and more people interested. And as I said earlier, we engage with everybody, and so I think that's got a lot to do with it. And also well, what I try and do, I mean, I can't do all this on my own. I try and identify people that are, you know, we all know them, live wires, and get them involved, and then they go away and find people to join, so then suddenly we've got another consistory to be consecrated because somebody's been away and not necessarily put arms up people's backs, but been away and encouraged and enthused people. So I think there's a lot of that, and we do have a really good product. It's a really good product, I think. It's certainly the kind of Freemasonry I like. Because I was involved in writing and rewriting these rituals. So it's the kind of Freemasonry I like. The thing I said earlier, the drama, the colour, the music. I think music's very important in the higher grades. And, darkness and flickering candles and flashing swords in flickering candles and all things like that. I mean, it's and they're all good, solid Bible stories, which people like. So I think there's lots of reasons, and it's kind of building a momentum, I think.
How do you get the music? Do you have it used at recordings?
Oh no, we have we have particularly in the fourth grade, there's lots of singing. I mean, you know, I talked about the Jews crossing the River Jordan with the Ark of the Covenant. Well, of course, then we sing all the 5 verses of you know, bread of heaven. You know, when I crossed the, you know, crossing the Jordan. So I mean, that gets everybody going because everybody knows that. You know, particularly the Welsh, they love that. So so that's what we use for that. Again, in the 6th grade, which is about the War of the Maccabees, there's a famous piece, Hail the Conquering Hero, from Judas Maccabeus by Handel, that we use in that, because that just fits in, you know, when the Maccabees are victorious in a battle, you know, that's played live on the organ at Mark Mason's Hall, that part of the oratorio. So we try and fit the music in, you know, because I think it just all adds to the drama. And we've got some, you know, our top organists are very, very, very good. You know, we've got some church organists and cathedral organist in one case. So, you know, it's the music is good. The music is good.
Wonderful. Christine, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you join us today.
No, it's been very illuminating and very informative, and I do hope that it's given me an added impetus now to get the OSM started.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to Christine. They want HFAF haven't got the OSM, so as soon as they've got the OSM, then I'm sure they'll love the Scarlet Cord.
Thank you. Well, just reading back here, and I'm trying to keep up with all the chats that are going on.
No, it's okay. That's fine.
You had a virtual application form with you right now. I'm sure many people will be wanting to hand
Well,
that.
it's on the website. Let me give a plug. Just MMH website. You can download an application form for the OSM and the Scarlet Cord.
Super. Brethren, we need to call it time there. I'm sure we can go on for a few more hours if we need to. But Ian, thank you once again for coming on and giving us the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Food for thought, and it's definitely whet my appetite. So thank you
Good.
very much. Before we do go,
what's your address? Form in the post.
Money in the post, was it? No. Just before we do go, our quiz today, or our question, what is Ian's favourite band? I'm going to allow Ian to explain the reason why, but we have 2 winners, and they are Christine and Paul Burgess. So you get a mug sent to you. If you could please, in the chat group, privately message me your address details, that'd be fantastic. I'll get that over to you, or likewise email me. Ian, tell us why.
Okay, so what happened was, those of you that are the Metropolitan Grand Lodge and Metropolitan Grand Chapter will know that we have a magazine called Arena Magazine, and every edition they do an interview with one of the Metropolitan Grand Inspectors. So when I became a Metropolitan Grand Inspector in whatever it was, I can't remember what it was now, they did an interview with me, and at the end of it, they say, tell us 5 things that people wouldn't know about you. And that's incredibly difficult, actually, incredibly difficult when you've led a sheltered life like I have. And so I got to 4, and they weren't even really interesting at all. I got to 4, and I couldn't think of anything else to say. So I thought I'll say something completely random. So I said, I've seen the West End musical Mamma Mia 84 times. I've never seen Mamma Mia. I've never seen Mamma Mia. And so I said that, and it's kind of grown. And when I did the podcast with Neil Thomas Allen and the Brother Masonic people, of course that got raised, and there were lots of Mamma Mia jokes. ABBA jokes, so it's just got to be a bit of a thing, actually. And but I mean, everybody likes ABBA, but it's not my favourite band. But I just thought it would be a lot of people know this, and a lot of people know the story. So that's the story.
What is your favourite band?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I've got a favourite band, actually. I don't think I've got a favourite band, to be honest.
Oh, winners then.
Technically, yes.
Oh no, it's got the other joke. That's the answer. That's the answer.
Somebody said it could be New Order. Not my joke. I just
Sorry,
stole it.
I
I
not
stole
your
it from the
joke.
chat.
Not your joke. No, no.